What is going on, everybody? It is Lane and Phil, and we are here to talk about some more 40k. Phil, how you doing today, my guy?
I'm good, man. I'm doing some painting. We got some more tournaments coming up, so I am getting prepared to play some more 40k. I'm looking forward to it. It's really exciting. But we are in a unique time of Warhammer 40k. We are in the time between editions. While everyone keeps hearing the rumors of 11th and the dredges of 10th are still forcing us to do some work, so we still have some jobs to do. But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's it it's kind of it can be hard to feel motivated. To it's like we've heard they gave us a fairly large preview. I feel like for 11th, in terms of kind of having more of a general picture of what is on the way. It wasn't super light, which was nice, but it's still a lot of unanswered questions. So kind of what we've decided is we want to try to give y'all some advice and some videos that's more evergreen, that'll still be applicable to 10th edition, as well as going into 11th, kind of getting into the right mindset as that new edition drops on what you can be doing as everything is going to change, and really how you can kind of hone in on what you should be doing in the new edition.
Yeah, it's a skill definitely in and of itself. When you watch these fantastic players as they get ready for a new edition and they transfer over, like they're still good at 40k. They learn to adapt. We will learn to adapt, and you, as mastercrafted viewers, will hopefully enjoy as we slowly transfer to 11th edition. Lane and I are looking to give you tools that will help you to adapt to the new edition, as well as teach you things that while you're still in 10th, you can take advantage of while you prepare for this next edition, because 40k by no means is over. We still have work to do. We still have things that we can learn. And just because they're learned in 10th edition doesn't mean we can't apply them to 11th editions. Lane, why don't you give us a little bit of background? What are we going to actually be talking about today? What is the tool that we think is going to transfer between 10th edition and 11th edition?
Yeah, so the big thing we want to talk about today is data sheet analysis, right? What are we really looking at on what makes some of these data sheets really good and makes us want to include them in our lists, right? Kind of one of the things we talked a lot about is overarching rules that you are going to deal with regardless of who you're playing into, right? So when we're talking about 10th edition and the way the benefit of cover worked, right? That is the most common example of things that it was everywhere. If you wanted cover, you could have it. It was given out like Oprah was there. And how you dealt with that was either you needed to have ignore cover or you needed to have high AP. So for 10th edition, having good AP stats kind of moved its way up on that stat line of, when you're looking at the profiles on these data sheets, is this a good unit? Does it have good weapons? Right. And so that's one of the things we're kind of dive into and kind of go through the process of what makes good units.
Yeah. So there's a lot of different things that go into evaluating a unit. And you'll see, lists when you go on and you go on to BCP and you're seeing all these lists and different units taken. You see these top players running units that you would have thought of. Um, and the question that always gets asked is, why did that player take that thing? Well, what you value in a unit is going to be completely different based on the job that it needs to do. So, like right off the bat, Lane said it already. One of the things that we evaluate when we're putting units in a list is what the AP of these units are. If I needed to shoot something dead or fight something dead, if it doesn't have good AP, there is a certain part of me that potentially either won't rely on that unit, won't put as much points into that unit, or I don't value that unit as highly, because AP is one of the things, especially in this meta, where if you want to be able to kill stuff, like you better have good AP, because there's a lot of 2-up saves out there. There's a lot of benefits of cover, and I heard AOC is a pretty good strat, and there's a few armies that have it. So if you don't have good AP, like you're going to struggle. And I think the perfect example of this is Custodian Guard, the axes, right? They are AP 1. Even though they're flat damage 3, don't matter. They're still awful, because AP 1 means that I will never put someone on a regular save, because there is so much AOC. There is so much like reduction of AP, like that it doesn't matter. So, it's a great example of a unit where you're spending a lot of points on Custodian Guard, and and as of right now, you're never going to take the axes over the spears, because the spears are AP 2. And even though they're flat damage 2, and I would much prefer to have flat damage 3, GW determined that that is not the case. They're going to be AP 2 or AP 1, and then the spears would be AP 2. So, like, right off the bat, if I'm evaluating a unit for lethality and it doesn't have good AP, it's gonna fall off for me there.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's one of the biggest things that, and it's easy to harp on is AP because yes, like so much of the game right now is either a 3 up save or a 2 up save, right? And AP1 just isn't enough to get you there, and that's even if they don't have AOC, right? Or if they, even if they don't have that for shooting, they just have cover. AP1 is just like already a non-starter, right? You can kind of go through these things and weed out, okay, this doesn't have AP. I can at least take that profile. I can maybe still take that unit, right? Like he was saying with Custodian Guard. We'll still play with Guard in lists and put them with the spears, but automatically they just can't take the axes, right? And one of the other things we can look at too, as we're going through, right, is we still need to have in mind which of these units still with the right strat support, right? Do I have extra AP and maybe a land strat, right? We're Blood Angels and we have access to that shit like it's candy, right?
Yeah.
Then maybe you can get away with some, lower AP and some other things like that. But in general, as you're looking at those data sheets and you're going, okay, which of these to fill this role do I want to take? You're looking at ways to rule it out on, okay, well, this doesn't do X for me, right? Because when we're making kind of a general list and a game plan, we're looking at what actually fills roles, multiple roles, hopefully, and what does them the best in those slots. Yeah, what would be, I guess, another example not based around lethality on stats we're looking for?
Yeah, the next one, and I think this is really important. And it's a big deal. Obviously, it's OC, right? Like if a unit has good OC, it can solve a lot of problems and it can do a lot of things in the game that normally some armies can't do. So I think a good example of this, we'll harken back to Necron Warriors. Let's say, for example, right? They are still popular in the meta. 20-man brick is still obnoxious with the character and the resurrection. Like, but would you believe me if I told you that Necron Warriors really don't kill anything? Like the majority of the
Yeah,
time, they're AP 0, 1 damage apiece, strength 4. They got a bunch of shots. They'll shoot a bunch of things, but they won't kill anything. But you know what they do? They resurrect. They have 2 OC. They go back on objectives and they will just straight up flip them. If you engage them in any meaningful way, if you charge them and you don't kill them all and they resurrect back on the objective and then they flip it, that is a tool unit that doesn't necessarily kill things in this meta. It doesn't have great AP, so you could be saying, hey, Phil, this is a bad unit, right? It doesn't have good AP. No, because it's not the job of that unit. The job of this unit is to engage multiple units, maybe not die, which is highly likely because those things are a pain in the butt to kill, and then resurrect back on objective and potentially turn a 5-point primary turn to a 15-point primary turn or deny your opponent in a significant manner. So, like, OC right off the bat when you're evaluating something, whether it's Orc Boys or Necron Warriors or a big brick of Cadians or Krieg, right? Like there are units that don't necessarily kill things, but they have great OC. And that is a good unit to have in your list if you're evaluating it that way.
yeah. You really, if you have access, especially to super cheap and then semi durable, right? When we're seeing people take the Necron spam, right? They have just Necron Warriors, a 20-man. It's so hard to deal with, right? When people are taking a 26 blob of Guardsmen, right? It's going to be in recon. It's going to be very hard to remove. They're getting so much valuable filling a high OC role with recursion because of being able to resurrect. And then also, just that high OC, it takes so few dudes on an objective or on a potential terrain piece in the future to flip it. Right. And so I think, that's another thing as we're kind of going through our list building, we're looking at those stats and, okay, well, which of my trash units, right? And this is going to be the thing that I think personally as a guard player kind of rivals with OC is when I'm looking at my utility units would I rather have a high OC battle line unit or do I want a unit that is similarly priced but gives me utility in another way? And sometimes that's very similar, right? With my Cadians, they're high OC, they have sticky, right? That's amazing. I'm getting utility and high OC that they can use to help, deny my opponent. And then my Catachans, they have scout and high OC, so I can kind of have that frontal assault. But for the same amount of points, basically, I have ratlings, right? I get infiltrate now for that amount of points, right? And I'm kind of building my layers of where I want or how I need to kind of layer my defenses and my denial through having different parts of my army that have very similar roles potentially and are very similar points, but they do different things specifically so that I can actually kind of have that game plan. And I think that's one of those, like, it's not a stat, right? It's their utility. What written rules really give stuff that extra utility? Infiltrate for ratlings, That's a huge example, right? What else comes to mind, Phil, when you were talking about just on datasheet utility?
Yeah, so there's a few units that stand out of just like they're good no matter what. For Death Guard, right? It's Plague Marines, it's Death Route Terminators. They could just run what they are as a data sheet, and I could offer them no support from the detachment rule or the army rule, and they're just good. Like a 10-man of Plague Marines with Malignant Plaguecaster and a Biologist Putrefier. I have seen them rip down Catans. I have seen them rip down big bugs. I have seen them rip down vehicles. It doesn't matter. They are an incredibly durable piece. Yes, they are expensive, but if you deliver them in a Rhino, they're absolutely fantastic. Dash Route Terminators, same thing. Lance, lethal, sustain. You throw a Lord of Contagion in there. You get a little spicy. You got a lot of flat damage 3, damage 2. Like, they're just good. They don't need support from anything else. And that's why you see them pop up in all these lists. That's why you see everyone takes, usually some version of Plague Marines or Death Route Terminators with some kind of a character attached, because it is just a good unit. It is not tied to a detachment. Same with Riptides right now. So for those that are panicking about the Tau Menace, right? Like Riptides, they're just good. They're good profile. They can go up to flat damage 4. They have great AP, one of the things we talked about in terms of making a unit actually lethal. And then they have great mobility in Monka. They have abilities in other detachments, and they have built-in, most importantly, ignore mods, fallback should charge. Right? Like for a unit to have that built into a unit's data sheet, it's very hard to avoid that. And that's why people are running 3 of them. Twin Lance, if people could run 3 Twin Lances, they absolutely would. But it's the same thing, right? High AP, great mobility, awesome tools, and it has nothing to do with the detachment they're in. Like you're gonna run Twin Lance and whatever. If you're running Tau, you're running Twin Lance because that unit is very, very good right now. Other things that stand out to me in terms of, let's just take Space Marines for example, right? A very popular faction. If you're not running intercessors, right, or infiltrators, one version of them, or even just basic JPI, there's a reason they're great, but it's not because of their lethality. It's just their data sheet. They have JPI have access to grenades, mortal wounds on the charge. They have access to a power fist and access to the common rule, which is at the moment pretty much off all the things, and then a 12-inch movement. So like they don't need support. They just go out and do a job, and they do a great job because they're 1 OC a piece. They can flip an objective really easily. They have decent combat, and then go in and get the job done. So, like when we're evaluating those 3 units, they're not even comparable to Plague Marines or Death Route Terminators, but they do have the aspect of they do their job really well. So when you're building a list and you're like, hey, what is, like we've talked about this multiple times of developing a game plan, getting your deployment zone ready, making sure you have a plan, is like this is the part when you're evaluating a data sheet. Like, are you going to go right off the bat and say the job of this unit is X? Easiest one is like, hey, the job of this unit is to hold my backfield. Great. What tools does that unit have to hold your backfield? Does it have up be down where it can not only hold your backfield, but it can also go out and do things? That's a pretty good multi-use unit. Maybe it has sticky where it can sticky the unit and then go out and do something. Or does it have a 12-inch no deep strike bubble like infiltrators? Right? Great. That's a fantastic unit because it's doing multiple roles. That's why Vespid are popular in Tau. They're not lethal. They don't necessarily do a whole bunch, but the fact that they can screen your backfield, they can go up and then come back down and still score you, secondaries that you could potentially need and screen out, like that's a fantastic position for that unit. And it's a great multi-role unit. And the more multi-role units you have, the more balanced your list is going to feel.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a lot of great examples, Phil. Yes, there is tons of utility on every single one of those data sheets. I was surprised you didn't say the Combi Lieutenant. I mean, I figured, we beat that one into the ground, but it is, right? It just a unit that has on its data sheet just things that make it just, stand above a lot of the other options you can take, right? And in all of those examples, whether it was from the lethality that some of those Death Guard units had, right, that Phil was talking about, or just in general of how versatile a lot of those Space Marine units were, right? They can do multiple jobs and stuff. And that's kind of one of those things that you want to take into account. It's not a, specific stat. It's just a tangible thing that is on their data sheet. And we want to really be looking at that stuff when it comes to making your game plan.
Yeah.
The next thing that I think we need to talk about is defensive stats, right? How much are those actually important? And it definitely varies, right? Not everybody has, we know we were going to talk about this, right? Not everybody has Bullgrid, right? Not everybody gets to just have the best idiots in the galaxy, right? They are absolute chads when it comes to playing the role of having just enough OC and being just good enough in combat to kill your trash, right? And all this other stuff. But the main thing they do is they're just tanky,
Yeah.
right? That's the biggest thing that matters with them is how annoying it is to remove them. And really looking at when you're looking at defensive stats, right? What are the things on a data sheet that make them hard to remove, right? For them, it's -1 damage, huge, absolute menace, right? Other things aren't so obvious, right? As a newer player, do you have 4 wounds per model? That's something that like not a lot of newer players initially pick up on. They're just like, oh yeah, but that difference between a 4 wound Terminator and a 3 wound Terminator for most armies is a pretty big difference because damage 3 has become so prevalent. Now, if you're hit Phil's Custodian Guard who have their 2 damage spears, it's the same math. But in general, the times that breakpoint is going to come up is actually pretty big.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's different versions of durability. So I think this is really important for people to understand that like you could very easily say in this meta, it is pretty lethal. I think Lane and I and the majority of our viewers and our guys in our Discord, guys and gals in our Discord would agree this is a very, very lethal addition with the amount of rerolls and +1 to wound and all the tools and all of this stuff. Like, yeah, absolutely. Very, very lethal. But there's some things out there that are exceptionally durable that have been causing absolute like chaos. We'll take Catanza as a perfect example. They are obnoxiously durable with their 3-up, 4-up, and a 5-up, feel no pain, and -1 damage, and the fact that they can bring back wounds, right? And reanimate wounds. Like they are incredibly durable for what has been an incredibly lethal addition. And we could talk about power creep until the cows come home, right? Because it's just going to keep happening, right? 10th edition as a whole, it started off pretty tame, and then now it's just creep, creep, creep. And I look back at previous like detachments that have been nerfed, and I'm like, man, I really wish we would just like take the tape off here and bring this detachment fully back because I would love to see how it interacts in the meta now that the meta has, I would say, surpassed where that detachment had been when it had been causing problems. So yeah, overall very interesting in terms of the durability because Lane's Bullgrin, absolutely durable, but not because of the same reasons that, let's say, a Land Raider is durable. Because Bullgrin have an invul, Land Raider does not. But a 2-up save with T12 and a good amount of 16 wounds, it means that it is actually relatively harder to shift, but it also has access to some stratagems that Bullgrin do not. So it has access to smoke, has access to AOC. So a 2-up save with AOC is one of the things that this meta has been unfortunately pushed to the limit of. I'll harken back to Ben Neal's Iron Hands list that recently won the Colorado Cup. That was 20 Terminators with 2-up, 4-up, access to AOC, access to -1 damage. So you have 4 wound Terminators that are just bebopping around the board, relying on durability. And that is something that we haven't seen in the meta up to this point. It's been one of those things where durability was almost frowned upon or very selective when you did it because there isn't enough consistent durability where if somebody runs into you, you're just gonna die.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's one of the other things too. Like, despite people teching to be able to kill 2-up save models, right, and just big things in general, right? People were teching to kill Catan. That does not mean you are teched to kill 20 fucking Terminators,
Yep.
right? With all the sauce, right? So it's one of those things of really trying to and that's kind of that next level I would say of you need to build a list that you are comfortable with and you can just get good at running, right? But after you start progressing, after you can start kind of playing around the meta and getting to kind of that level of play, go, okay, well, what is everybody else running that is really, this is what people are teching into? Do I have options to kind of maybe still like just because people are bringing a lot of damage to deal with tanky things doesn't mean you can't keep bringing tanky things. It's just you're going to be like Ben potentially and benefit from bringing, kind of an off-brand tanky from what everybody else is really, prepared for. So I think that's, a good way to kind of summarize, what we're looking at when we're trying to do, how durable a unit can really be in those toughness statistics. We've also hinted at it a little bit, and in we shouldn't even need much time, right? Go fast is good, right? Movement, right? If you have the option between 2 comparable things and one is faster, in general, we want the faster thing. PK is a game of movement and positioning. The better you can do with that, the better you're going to be. And so really, the other unit that's slow better have some very good trade-offs on why you're not taking some of this fast stuff. If the fast unit is fast but does absolutely nothing, okay, yeah, sure, we're not going to take it. But in general, movement is such a big part of this game.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why you see armies like Drakari, like Eldar, like still performing well. They're still in the hands of great players and they're still performing well. Things like Makatao, right? Like giving a whole army assault and um 6-inch auto advance, and you have great base movement and it's just all zipping around the board. Yeah, sure. Of course that's good. That makes sense to me. And Lane is absolutely right. Until objectives go away and it's just now an open board and just gun line versus gun line, movement will always be an important part of the game. And you just have to be prepared for that. Now, let's use two different examples of two different armies. Death Guard is not known for its high mobility. You have to rely on like rhinos and you're relying on maybe some spawn to get in there with a scout move, right? Like your poxwalkers aren't super fast. So that means Death Guard is bad, right? Like they just can't perform in the meta.
Yeah, no, 100%. They're just trying. No, I'm just kidding.
Do you have to rely on something else to cover for that? So like, at the end of the day, positioning matters more because you can't make up for positioning mistakes in Death Guard because you don't have access to like an uppy down strat. You don't have access to great mobility to kind of, play off your opponent's game plan. You have to be pretty strict on your game plan. You have to be able to execute it based on the list that you took. So, for example, indirect is still a big part of this game, and that's why Plague Burst crawlers are still kind of popular right now because they can cover down what the mobility that Death Guard doesn't have. It can go pick up screening units that they just definitely don't have the movement to always get after. So, like, that's a tool there they use to cover for the mobility issues. They
Mhm.
also have what is probably one of the most durable units in the game compared to Catan's is like Mortarion, and then the mini Mortarion where you take a virulent with the enhancement for the feel no pain. Like you have just durability where at the end of the day you're just going to shove them on an objective, and some armies will be able to handle that and pass the stat check. Some will not. They will
Yeah.
not be able to kill Mortarion, or they won't be able to kill mini Mortarion, and they will just struggle. So at the end of the day, like every army can succeed, but you have to find what the tools are that that army can give you. You can't force mobility into an army that doesn't have the tools to give you mobility. You're not just taking spawn and rhinos out the wazoo to cover for Death Guard's lack of mobility. You're probably leaning into some of the things that Death Guard does well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it is, we try to give as much general advice as
Yeah.
we can and stuff, but like, yes, Death Guard, right? It really has to, as Phil said, right? You have to build into your game plan. How are you actually going to, handle things, whether it's, leaning on the toughness of Mortarion or really making sure you're getting rid of your opponent's trash effectively early so that when you do deep strike your death shrouds finally on turn 3, they can not only get into a very good first target, but are in a position to continue playing the game, right? Like you have to get to that point with a game plan and understand how your army functions to really exceed. You can be the best data sheet analysis person and be like, I have all these amazing data sheets. And it's like, yes, you took 3x6 death shroud because yes, they are very good. But in application, were you able to do anything with them? No, right? We can't solely take things because they're very, very good. We have to
Yeah.
have a game plan when we're putting this stuff together.
Yeah. So we've talked about pretty much every like shocker. Lane and I look at all the components of a data sheet to determine whether it's good or not, right? Like, yes, we're looking at the movement. Yes, we're looking at the OC. We're looking at the lethality of the unit. We're looking at the data sheet rules. And then we also want to value how they interact with the detachment itself for the army rule itself. So you may be saying, well, Phil, how am I supposed to incorporate all of that into evaluating a unit? And how am I supposed to take that and get better in terms of list building and making the right choices? And I'm going to simplify it all for y'all out there. So take some notes. This is kind of important. Um, if you go role by role of what you want your unit to do and then find the best unit to fill that role, and then hey, if this unit can fill multiple roles, you can do that. So what I would write out just so I have a general understanding and build from there is like, okay, I want this unit to contest objectives. Great. What are the units in my entire codex? Go step by step. For some of us, it's like 30 data sheets. For Space Marines, it's like 180. But I would look at the general units and say, okay, what are my actual good units for contesting objectives? Well, if I'm going to look at it from let's just do a general one of a Space Marine objective, right? I'm going to look at the units that actually trade well on my opponent's objective. I'm going to look at JPI. I'm going to look at Victrix Honor Guard. I'm going to look at like just generic intercessors, maybe, or Stern Guard. Maybe I'm looking at Terminators with a Banner Ancient because I want the +1 OC, and that's what I'm going to use. Or maybe I say, hey, I actually don't care about contesting objectives physically, but what I'm going to use to contest objectives is maybe my rep X's, right? Those are the things that I'm going to use, and I'm going to prioritize their job on these layouts is going to be to flip my opponent's objectives because I'm going to shoot them off till they're dead, and that is how I'm going to flip them. But that means that your game plan for contesting objectives is shooting them off, which means the things that are going to stop you from doing that are lone up, are sticky on death, are sticky in general, or reactive moves, right? Like you have to be able to plan for those things. So it's like, okay, well, I know I need to contest my opponent's objectives. I cannot go the game and not contest objectives, but that is the job right off the bat. What are some other jobs, Lane, that you think that, if we're going to put roles into units, some other general jobs that we need players to prepare for?
It can be as simple as screening, right? We talk about your home field objective holder, right? That's a unit that preferably, if I'm looking at things that cost the same points, I want something with a large footprint. Or I want infiltrators that just have a 12-inch denial. Those are things that we're looking at that really fill a role, right? When it comes to, for me, right, like I have my Bulgrin. We'll hammer this home. They are not meant to go kill a thing. If they do, that's great. If I have the chance to go tie something up, awesome. But they are meant to be something that my opponent cannot ignore, right? And that works for my game plan, right? I have the inbuilt points because guard is cheap enough that I can have things that I'm like, well, it's not going to hit anything, but it's going to go stand out there. And if you do not deal with it, it is just going to be in your deployment zone and you are not going to move ever again, right? So having something that fills that role of forcing your opponent to do something because it is so inherently tanky and is so much of a problem, right? That's another role we can look at. As Phil said, right? Repexes, right? They're there to clear things off objectives, right? When we're talking about, we'll talk about like T-Suns, right? Those rubric squads trade so efficiently into just most normal small things, right? They're going to be great for denying, right? You can do a scoop move to get on. You can really just have a lot of lethality with some of the buffs that are within there, and some of those attachments just have great damage amplification. But anyway, that's another great role, right? We can just
Yes.
build our army around multiple trading units that just have there's so much redundancy, right? In a T-Sun's army where they're like, oh yeah, I just have like 5 squads of rubrics. That's turn after turn of just being able to be like, oh cool, well I yeet that, you don't score. I yeet that, you don't score. And if you try
Yeah.
to come near me, I might just overwatch you because you're only 5 wounds and you're a trash unit, so you're dead.
Yeah. And that's like that would be a trading their job is to trade. And there's other units that do that well as well. I think, if you watched our videos when we just talked about the newest Huron's Marauders, when we talked about Legionnaires, those are in terms of units, they are great trading units, right? They can punch up because they're going to have rerolls to wound. They have flexibility in terms of what characters you attach to them at the start of the game. If I was going to give them a job, if I'm going to say what their job is, they are traders. That's what they do. Same with as Lane said, Rubric Marines, those are trading units. If that's the job I'm going to give them, that's what I want them to do, which is a fantastic job to have. But what makes a good trading unit is one, being flexible into a lot of different data sheets. Because if I have to put something out that isn't the trading unit, like that's not its job, then I'm putting myself in a position where I'm going to have to deviate from my game plan. But for example, what Legionnaires give, which means that they're so efficient, is they have great mobility. They have access to power fists. They have access to special weapons, full rerolls to wound built in. They have access to good character support that you can attach. Um, and they have access to good OC. And for some of these attachments, they have 6-inch auto advance. They have abilities to advance in charge, or they have abilities to dark pack for sustained or lethal. So they can go into some of these things and really punch up or down, right? To get into some of these horde lists or to get into some of these high durability lists. And they can't really be stopped. Like Legionnaires are gonna get into you, especially if they're coming out of a Rhino. And they're gonna go do what they need to do because they have the OC to flip an objective. They have the lethality to punch up or punch down, and they have good mobility. They have good movement. So like that is what encompasses a good trading unit. Some other good trading units that we've already talked about. I've already said JPI. They're a fantastic trading unit. They're also a contesting unit. So like that means it's got 2 jobs. Like I can go after certain things with that unit. For example, like I think like Tau breacher teams, those are good trading units. GSC acolytes with hand flamers, those are incredible trading units because not only can I plus one to my AP and ignore cover, but also like I get full rerolls to wound when you're on an objective. I have good OC. I have decent combat, believe it or not, and I can go in and charge. Those are great trading units, and I can bring them back. That's what makes them even better. Like I don't feel bad throwing them away, and that's a trading unit, and that's its job because that's what I've identified it to do. We'll harken back. Like, if we talk about, I think we can encompass all this together of lethality units. If I want a lethal unit, for you and guard or T-Suns or um, whatever it is you're running, our sisters. Like, overall, what are some of we already talked about AP. Let's go right over
Yeah.
that. If you guys forget that, like, please go back and watch it because we talked about it enough. But if we're going to say, hey, this is a lethality unit, it's its job to kill, what are some other things that you're looking at to ensure that that's like that job can be fulfilled by it?
Yeah, so I think this is one of those things that, especially as the previews for 11th have come out, right? This is going to shift, right? AP, it's had to be one of the most important stats that we look at when we're talking about, what is the job of this thing? Unless it is to kill 5-up save idiots, it needs to have more than AP 0 or AP 1, right? And unless we are just killing the trashiest of trash, we are looking to be AP 2, right? But in general, right, when we're looking at those stats, the major thing too, my golden rule is I try to be in a spot where I can wound most things that I want to be shooting on threes, right? Looking at our strength versus what is going to be the toughness of the units that I generally am going to be trying to put this into. I want to be wounding on threes is kind of the general rule, right? There's going to be some deviations and stuff, but you're never gonna always shoot the only thing that it's meant to shoot, right? So we want to have that flexibility. Putting yourself in a position where is generally wounding the things you want it to shoot at on threes means that it's definitely high enough strength to wound. And then anything that's not as tough, yeah, cool, we're wounding on twos. It's probably not going to have enough shots to really be efficient into those units, right? When we're talking about Phil's repexes, they will absolutely dumpster most tanks with that high AP, right? As long as they don't have an invuln, it's going to just pump through damage, right? But as soon as he sees those Terminators, he's going to kill two, right? And he's wounded on twos, right? It's not a super efficient gun into a lot of other things, but thank God it just has 6 buckets of dice that go with it for the rest of its array, right? So they help kind of fill that void for that profile or for that tank and stuff. So yeah, we're looking at how hard is it going to be for them to make saves. That has been one of the most affected things of this edition in 10th, right? Between the AOC and the cover that we've talked about, especially in shooting, right? If you don't have reasonable AP against moderate targets, it can be a T5 Terminator. It's not that tough, right? We need to have the AP. Next, we need to have the strength. And then going forward, Phil and I have talked quite a bit about this already, is if the change for cover does come up, that it's now you are -1 ballistic skill or -1 to hit, right? How well your units just hit in general is actually going to really come up a lot more. Like, oh yeah, I need to make sure I'm hitting okay. Like for most armies, it was just kind of a given, right? Like you have things that just generally hit well. If we shift into 11th and we do just have -1 to hit rampantly running around, units that hit on twos versus hit on threes are going to be a lot higher premium. For me, for guard, right? The grizzled company running Scions and Kazarkin is going to feel so much better because they hit on threes base, right? We can pump them up to hitting on twos versus a lot of the tanks in the guard army. If they're hitting on fours, they just lose so much efficiency that like that's a really hard thing to commit to, and it's going to actually be a much larger factor versus like where we even start the conversation of what units are good, right? There's ways around that, right? We've talked about things that are on data sheets. Oh, do I have full rerolls to hit? If you're on an objective, okay, leave and rust battle tanks might actually be okay now, right?
Mhm.
Like, do we have ways to really, you know, negate -1 to hit? Because as we've talked about, when we're talking about the math of doing damage, the earlier in the sequence that you have a negative, the more impactful it is. +1 to save is not remotely as impactful as -1 to hit, as long as neither of them can be ignored, right? If you're just making it to where I am not even hitting you, I'm hitting you a sixth less, that means that where that extrapolates to how many fewer wound rolls I'm even having that I'm going to make, I even get to roll, which means that's even fewer saves you're going to have to make on your, better save, right? Like it's just one of those things where we're really going to have to keep in mind as we move towards the new edition. That's the only one we've really had previewed. for now, but like hopefully this video is something that you can kind of take and hope maybe -1 to wound is just not a thing anymore. Actually, I'm really hoping +1 to wound is just not a fucking thing anymore. We just kind of pump the brakes on how rampant that has become. But like just really looking at what is making these units good, right? Like if the core rules of the game say, oh yeah, it's just harder to hit in general now, we're gonna go, okay, well, that means I need to have things that either ignore hit mods, right? Your land forts, oh man, Votan is just having a heyday, right? They're gonna be happy. I don't give a shit. Eat a land fort. Or flamers, right? We talked about T-Suns. I don't give a shit. I have Rubric Marines. I don't even
Yeah.
have to hit, right? Your rule means nothing. And I have ignore cover reroll wounds. They could not have been affected less, besides the fact that not even then. Yeah. Like they ignored cover originally anyway. So like they just yeah, completely unaffected, right?
Yeah.
But I think that's going to be one of the biggest things is really trying to, as we go into the new edition, there's going to be new problems to solve. 15-inch loan up, right? That's maybe where some of that speed is actually going to be way more impactful on your units. Units like Warp Spiders, if you're not taking 3 units of fucking Warp Spiders as an Eldar player, I don't know what the fuck you're doing. They literally counter the entire premise of what keeps things safe in the new edition that's coming up. You're just like, oh, that's cool. You try to keep your trash safe. How cute. Yeah, I don't care. But really analyzing, kind of what are the overarching problems that the edition is going to give you as a player and how to really work around them, I think is going to still be very important. That's why we wanted to, kind of just give a primer on that now so that as we do go into the new edition, hopefully y'all will feel a little bit more comfortable kind of sussing out your own armies on your own.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll wrap this up because I'll be honest, like we want to make this as general as possible. We want to kind of inspire thought because I can't go through every data sheet with you and say, yep, that unit's good. That unit does a job. That unit doesn't do a job. We need to pick something else. Points don't always correlate towards the value of a unit. A good unit, even expensive, can still be a good unit. Great example, Combi Weapon Lieutenant went up 15 points. I'm still taking him because he is that good. Like I will pay 85, paid 95 points for him because I took the enhancement on him as well. That I'm perfectly happy taking that unit still, even though he went up 15 points. And if you were to correlate that to some other units in the game, he's more expensive than Ratlings. Is he better than Ratlings? Abso-freaking-lutely. Like for me and what I value for that unit, it's fantastic. So don't necessarily like it's very easy to say, well, my Combi Weapon Lieutenant is more expensive than those Ratlings. Combi Weapon Lieutenant must be bad, or the Ratlings must be bad. No, they're doing a job in that army. So, like, I'll give you some overarching premises that you just need to put in the back of your head. Hopefully, you hear my voice whispering, hey, this is what you need to do when you're building your list. But if I'm going to build an elite style army, I need units. Every unit has to be able to do multiple jobs. You cannot have these one-offs of, oh, this unit is the only thing they're good at is X. The only thing they're good at is, like, for an elite army, the only thing they're good at is for contesting objectives. It can't just be that because these elite units are so expensive that, like, you're not going to be efficient overall. That's why Custodian Guard, like, we'll use my Custodians as an example, is like, that's why Custodian Guard are so solid right now because it's like, well, what do Custodian Guard do well? They have great OC. They have access to lethal or sustained on command. They have access to very good like base hit and wound roll modifier, like base hit and wound roll stats. Hitting on 2s is fantastic. Strength 7 minus 2 for 2 means that like you're pretty much wounding everything on 5s, which is nice when you have lethal sustains. And then obviously when you get full rerolls to wound on an objective that you control, right? Like that is just so nice to have. It means that they're so efficient with the base OC and durability and 3 wounds a pop, 4 wounds on the banner, right? Like we're talking about a unit that does multiple jobs. And that's why that elite army is able to succeed. If you are running an elite army and you're like, well, my big brick of Terminators or whatever is like, actually like they don't have access to any good mobility. They don't have any access to good OC. The only thing they do is murder. Great. But you might struggle in some matchups because that's the only thing that I could do.
Yeah, and it's definitely one of those things, right? It's as Phil said, we can't do every army, but we want to, and we'll get to it eventually, right? Eventually, by the end of 11th edition, we'll done a deep dive on every faction, right? I hope we can do it by the end of 11th. If it takes us that long, I'm gonna be pretty disappointed, but I've got faith. But yeah, I think that's it in terms of just really trying to go over, analyzing data sheets with, kind of a set game plan in mind. I think is a good exercise to do it. You can purely, like, when you first are getting into a new army or something, just go through data sheets and try to learn what do these things that I have actually just do on their own, right? And then as you're reading through detachments, like personally, that's what I prefer to do, is like, what on these data sheets do I think I would actually like to play around, and then which of my detachments best support it, and then I'll tweak from there. Right? Maybe I'll have kind of an idea, and then I'll end up tweaking and narrowing it down to some other things that are very similar. But I think that's one of the better ways to, like, really approach a new codex is to look over the data sheets first and see what inherent power they have within them, and then kind of say, okay, now looking at that, what can I go and apply new detachments, and really see how that can kind of just make them even better or buff the pieces around them even and stuff. So yeah, yeah. Any final thoughts, Phil? Are we good on data sheet analysis?
I feel like I could talk about like data sheet analysis for hours. Yeah, like just general understanding, really important. Play what you enjoy, play what you have fun with. There's tools all over the game, right? Like that's the one of the best parts about 40k in terms of list building is even though the game has narrowed a little bit, there's so many tools in all of these data sheets that if you practice with it and you understand the detachment, you have a good job for it, and you understand what that job is, you can be effective. You can win games of 40k, even if it's surprising for your opponent because it's not something that's traditional. Don't get tied into the process of, well, I'm going to run what's broken or I'm going to run what I see winning tournaments or whatever the case is. Like, hey, there is still room for innovation. Things are still being worked on right now to find the last little dregs that we can get out of 10th edition before we transfer over. And these skills, as we said at the beginning, will help you in 11th edition. How you evaluate data sheets will make or break your list building. So yeah, just be prepared.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you all for tuning in. If you haven't liked and subscribed, please do so. If you have not already, go ahead and comment. Tell us one of your favorite data sheets and why it's busted. If it's not Lieutenant Combi Weapon and you're a Space Marine player, Phil's going to be disappointed. But go ahead and do it. Drop a comment, please. That helps us out. And last but not least, do not forget that victory is not given. It is forged. And it's forged right here on Mastercrafted. We will see you all next time.